I would next like to ask Natalie Tellwright to come to the stage. She's going to talk to us about addressing transparency at sea and the electronic monitoring solutions for social responsibility and environmental sustainability. And so I think I've been very fortunate to have worked with Natalie in the past in a different capacity. She was engaged heavily in some social responsibility aspects, and I know it's near and dear to her heart. So if I could please ask Natalie to come to the stage. I don't see her in the room, actually. Let me track her down. Yeah, we had to do a little bit of shuffling on the schedule, and so we had to move her a little bit later in the schedule. So hopefully, there she is. Let's welcome Natalie to the stage. Thank you so much, Natalie. I just gave you a glowing introduction, and we're very appreciative of you making it to the stage today to give the presentation. So thank you so much.
Sorry, and thank you for moving me today. I was supposed to be yesterday, and now I'm late for the second one, so not a good start. So I'm going to be talking about electronic monitoring solutions for social responsibility. And so before I dive into this project that we're working on, this pilot project, I'll just ground it in a few of the problems that the fishing industry is facing. And I'm not going to go into all of them, but human rights is a real problem in the fishing industry. The ILO estimates over 100,000 people are trapped in forced labor, and this number is growing, it's expanding, and there's increasing reports of this, so it's a real severe issue. A second issue the fishing industry is facing is a lack of grievance mechanisms. So fishers struggle to report issues that they face, and it also means that issues are being underreported, but also it means that there's a lack of evidence being collected on these issues. So sometimes issues can be raised, but it's fishers' words against the captains. Another issue is observer safety. So operating conditions at sea are really challenging for the crew, for the fishers, but also for observers. And their safety is more at risk because of some of the compliance functions that they may be doing. And then finally, I promise this presentation isn't all doom and gloom, it's just to ground what I'm speaking about. There's a lack of data for social responsibility. So currently, social responsibility is usually grounded in social audits. They're one moment in time, and typically they're not that sufficient. So we need to triangulate more on data sources for social responsibility. Okay, so now to the good stuff, now to some of the opportunities. So electronic monitoring presents a real opportunity to help some of these issues. One of these opportunities is the fact that it already exists. Tech is out there. We've heard about it for the last day and a half, but it's been growing. You know, this technology has been out there for the last couple of decades. It's getting better, it's expanding, it's improving. So we don't need to add another technology component. There are also existing and expanding requirements to use EM. There's been over 100 trials of EM so far, and even though only relatively few numbers of vessels have the technology, RFMOs are looking to expand possible requirements for it. At the moment, they only require observer coverage, but RFMOs are looking into this. Coastal states also have expanding coverage for EM, so there's opportunities for expanding in this space. There are also increased industry commitments to have observed vessels, either human observer coverage or EM. If we take Thai Union, they recently made a commitment to source 100% of vessels from fully observed vessels, either EM or human observed. And Walmart Foundation have also made the same commitment. This is for 2025 and 2027. So there's an industry push to increase EM as well. And then finally, because of the increased reporting of the labor issues that I spoke about in the media, there is a demand to reduce these labor risks. People now know this is a severe problem, right? The things that I'm talking to you now, this is not new. You've heard it all before. So there is a huge demand now to increase risks in the seafood industry. Industry members know this, consumers know this, and so there is a drive to reduce industry risk, and part of that is through better social responsibility, better triangulation of data sets, and for that we need more data. So because of these problems, because of these opportunities, we have developed a pilot project in collaboration with the Nature Conservancy, Global Fishing Watch, Humanity Research Consultancy, Arizona State University, Thai Union, Ocean Mind, and this project is funded by the Walmart Foundation. And the pilot is to research the potential applications of electronic monitoring solutions for labor issues to improve social responsibility. The idea being that this technology was developed for environmental risks, right, to look at fish. But what if we could look at people? What if we could identify labor risks, and how would that work? The pilot project is a 2-year project, and it's got 3 phases. The first is the research phase, which we're in right now, and it takes us through the end of the year. The second is the pilot phase, which is into 2024, and then the third phase is the apply phase. And I'll speak to each of these phases a little more. But before I do, I wanted to ground what we're doing here in this idea of help or harm. We don't know if electronic monitoring can be useful for labor issues or social responsibility. It's never been piloted before, or at least it's never been independently piloted before. So we genuinely don't know if it's helpful or if it's harmful. So we need to ask this question before we start diving into, electronic monitoring for labor issues or social responsibility. We need to ground our research in this question, because the primary benefactor of any technology for seafood should be the fishers. It should be the crew on board, the observers, people working on board the fishing vessels. So if it doesn't help them, if it harms them, we shouldn't use it. So this is what we're grounding our research in. Okay, so the first phase is the research phase, and we'll be looking into the ethics of surveillance. The reason we're doing this is because surveillance has been used as a tool for a number of decades, especially in terms of urban crime. So what are the lessons that we can learn from ethics in surveillance? The second is fisher consent. Currently, fishers don't need to give their consent because electronic monitoring isn't used to watch them, right? It's used to watch people. So as we move from watching fish to watching people, we'll need to get the consent of the crew to watch them. So how will we do that, and what will that look like? The third consideration of the research phase is privacy, right? Fishing vessels are not only their place of work, but also their place of rest and socializing and washing. And the deck is also where they do all of these things. So we know we shouldn't have cameras in private spaces like accommodation, but what about cameras on the deck where, they wash or they go to the toilet or they hang out? So what are the privacy considerations of looking at what people are doing on the deck in terms of this? And then we'll also be looking into data ownership and sharing. So the jurisdictional complexities of electronic monitoring are really complex, right? If you've got fishing vessels operating in coastal state A from flag state B with crew state C, and then you add in labor issues and data sharing, it gets very complex very quickly. So we'll be looking into those considerations about what data would need to be shared in order for it to be acted upon. And then lastly, in the research phase, and probably the most important, is we'll be conducting interviews with crew, with captains, with vessel owners, with industry members, to understand what are their perspectives on whether we can apply electronic monitoring for social issues. What do they think about it? What are their concerns? Do they think it could help or could it harm? Then we'll have the pilot phase, and this is where we'll be testing electronic monitoring data and its application for these issues. So we'll be reviewing electronic monitoring data, video footage, and we'll be testing to see if we can identify what labor indicators can we see in that data. So can we check for things like working hours? Can we check if people are wearing their PPE? Can we see if any abuse or violence occurred? Can we see if accidents occurred and whether medical attention was given? So we'll be developing labor indicators in that data. We'll also be looking into whether additional cameras or changes in camera locations need to be modified, because there may be certain things that we can't see, but just by moving the camera, we'll be able to see certain indicators. So we'll be testing that. We'll also be testing interoperability with things like connectivity at sea. Providing Wi-Fi for fishers at sea is a really important component towards better, decent work. So we'll be looking into how these two systems, electronic monitoring and connectivity at sea, can better speak to one another, and whether crew could flag or tag the data or videos to be reviewed at certain points. And then lastly, we'll also be looking into other interoperable solutions like edge computing. So can electronic monitoring data be analyzed on deck using AI solutions, some of which we've heard about, live on boards, so that if an accident happens or if abuse happens, can that be automatically detected and flagged to the relevant monitoring center live for action to be taken? Oh, I'll just whiz through these. Great, and then lastly, the apply phase. So what is all of this for? So the end result is to develop guidance on a program design for if electronic monitoring can be used for labor issues and social responsibility. So as part of this program design, we'll have a performance standard. So the performance standard will contain the normal things that performance standards do, like data requirements, hardware requirements, data sharing, etc. We'll also be looking into the costs. So this is super important, especially off the back of some of the conversations we've just been having. How much is this additional analysis going to cost? Is it going to be double? If so, it's probably not going to be scalable at the moment. Also, what are the additional costs for data sharing or data storage in the cloud? We'll also be researching future efficiencies. So some of the conversations we've been having today about AI and the applications of on-deck automation, how can that help technologies like this? So can we automatically see if an accident happened, and what's the cost of that, and how could it be applied? We'll also be looking into the scaling potential of this through market mechanisms. Cost is going to be the main important factor to consider whether this is scalable at all. And so all of this ties into whether there'll be market drive, market incentives for whether this is scalable. And then lastly, and most importantly, we'll be looking into what wider system is needed for this to be successful. We know that electronic monitoring for labor issues will not really help if it's done in isolation. It needs to be grounded with other things like providing Wi-Fi for fishers, providing safe mechanisms for crew to report their issues and grievances, and for market actors to be more responsible by having binding obligations with crew. And so finally, we'll be setting up an advisory committee to have advice and support on this guidance. And so I'd welcome you all, if you're interested in EM for social, to contact me afterwards. We'll be happy to have any support and advice as we undertake this pilot. And so thanks again, and I'm really sorry that I was late to starting this.